Hello and welcome to the channel. Today we are riding through my neighbourhood, riding through the big, bad, disease-ridden London town as we aim to find out if the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 is any good for city riding and urban commuting. Let's do this. So then at face value, one might think this is a little bit of a pointless video. Surely there are just good bikes and bad bikes. Why would it matter whether you're in a city or not? But of course, we all know that that really isn't the case. There are many bikes out there that are lauded as some of the best bikes ever to have been created that are just diabolically bad in cities. Take, for example, my Aprilia V4 Tuono. Absolutely beautiful bike, quite possibly one of the greatest bikes ever made, but an absolute pig to ride in the city. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, to be completely honest with you. It is very aggressive, very lumpy, it gets very hot. So there are, of course, a number of things that we look for in a bike when it comes to a machine that we're going to be using for this type of urban riding. And those things really boil down to the fueling. That's really important, how it handles off the line, you know, in those kind of low RPM, low idle situations where you're trying to get away. Other things like the heat profile of the bike, very important as well. So you want a bike that doesn't necessarily cook you alive. Other things like, you know, having a clutch that's manageable, a nice light clutch. All these things, they're more kind of practical things. But in a city where you're doing quite a lot of technical riding, that stuff really matters. Other things like the profile and size of the bike as well, the weight of the bike, the seat heights. These are all things we're going to talk about in this video as we work out what this bike's like to ride in and around the urban environment. So off the line, this bike is incredibly smooth. Royal Enfield have done a fantastic job on the fueling. There is nothing to report in terms of lumpiness or unpredictability in that lower rev range. It's incredibly smooth off the line, and I've got the clutch out all the way at just under 20 miles an hour in first gear there, and there's no lurching or hunting. The bike is just very, very smooth, and that's really quite important for a city like London where you're constantly on and off the throttle. You're constantly in stop-start traffic, and of course we are surrounded with 20 mile an hour speed limits. You know, it's very, very slow in London. So you're never really going to be getting up to a massive amount of speed. I rarely get into third gear, for example. So you're always, you know, first, second, touch of third, with slow speed, run on off the clutch. So it's really important that that fueling is smooth, so we're not constantly being chucked about on the bike. As you can see, clutch is quite happily all the way out at around 10, 15 miles an hour. You don't have to feather it at all. You can just dump it out and you'll be all right. As you can see, even if I just let go of everything at this speed, it's not lurching at all. It's still very, very smooth, very predictable, very easy for a novice rider to get your head around. Well, I would really like to get around this bus. Dude, where are you going? Let's see if we can nose in front of him. So yeah, we've established then that cruising through London's network of 20 mile an hour speed limits in amongst the buses and the traffic and the network of over 300 speed cameras, 300 speed cameras plus in this city, means that you do need to watch your speed. So I'm pleased to report that there are no issues when it comes to that low speed control on the bike. Now, interestingly, as I'm at the lights here, one of the interesting things to talk about, if you look at the idle speed, we're around 1200 RPM just sitting on the idle there, and I think that's one of the tricks that Royal Enfield have used to help with that smoothness. That's quite a high idle speed, so I think they've kind of saved you having to pick the bike up off a typically low RPM where it might be a little bit more bumpy. It's quite smooth up at that 1200 RPM, so you're just picking it up from a bit of a rolling start almost, and I think that definitely helps with some of that low speed handling. It's a pretty nifty trick, but as you can see here, this bike is well warmed up, and we're at about 1300 RPM, so I think that's definitely aiding the smoothness of this bike from the get-go. So the other big thing to talk about on a bike that you're going to use a lot in the city is the heat management of the machine. Now this, of course, is an air-cooled / oil-cooled bike, so it doesn't have any advanced liquid cooling going on. It's quite kind of old technology, and to be honest, I have never noticed any heat coming off this bike really at all. It's a very, very cool bike, temperature-wise, and to look at. But no, it's honestly very good. I'm sat here at these traffic lights here, having been riding in London for about 15 minutes or so, and if I was on a sports bike or a big adventure bike, I would already be kind of medium rare by now. I think it's safe to say. So yeah, it's pretty impressive from a heat profile standpoint. It's quite possible that the Scorpion red power pipes have helped that a little bit, because they do flow those gases through a little bit quicker. I noticed that the factory pipes do get very hot. Not hot enough to feel on your legs as they're kind of behind you on the bike, but honestly I don't feel any heat waves rising up off this machine. It may of course be a different story if you're out riding about in a big Indian city where the ambient temperature is a lot hotter, but you know, even having ridden this bike in the summer, didn't ever experience any crazy heat coming off this bike at all. Here we are now at the very famous Smithfield Market. You used to be able to come here and sell your wife, believe it or not. It's just meat now, but it is London's original meat market. You have to be a bit careful riding around here, because rather disgustingly there's a lot of fat and animal waste on the roads around here. It makes it very slippery. So if ever you're out and about on these corners here, do watch out. Sound of this bike is lovely. It does help having a nice loud pipe in the city as well. You can let everyone know that you are here. The other thing that you really want when you're scooting about in the city is a good clutch. Now when I say good, I mean nice and light, nice and predictable, nice and smooth. And I've got a couple of little nitpicks with this clutch. One of them is it's got a bit of a weird crunch to it. I've been trying to figure out what's causing it, and you know, it's something in the cable. I think it's the little plastic housing inside the clutch perch or something like that. Something that feels like it's catching. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I'm going to change out the clutch cable and see if that helps. I was talking to somebody recently on the channel about the Venhill cable, so I'm going to get one of those in, see if that helps it. It's always interesting when you see a guy sat in the left lane indicating right, and now he can't go. Well done, mate. You were going to piss everybody off doing that. Oh, yikes. So that Venhill cable is definitely worth looking into. It might just help it smoothen out a little bit. Go on, buddy. Overall, the clutch is actually quite nice. It's quite light. It's obviously a mechanical clutch, so it's not going to be as progressive or tactile as a hydraulic clutch, but I quite like it. It's got a nice feel to it. It's got a bit of heft to it, a bit of weight to it, but you definitely don't get sore fingers after, you know, an hour or so riding in the city. It's pretty easy on the old hands there. I quite like it. I have actually replaced my clutch perch, but that didn't really change much in terms of the weight of the clutch. But it has helped the clutch action a little bit. I found the factory clutch to be a little bit sloppy. There was a little bit of, you know, up and down vibration in it, and sometimes it meant that when you pulled a clutch, you felt like you were almost wrenching it out of its socket, rather than a nice clean pull. Now, one of the great things about London on a motorcycle is you can ride in the bus lanes, as long as it's on a red route. So what else do I look for when riding around in the city on a bike? One of the big things that I always appreciate is a good rear brake. Now, I am a big fan of just using the rear brake in the city. You know, you can pull up really smoothly on the rear brake. It's definitely a lot more progressive and easy to kind of feather it as you're getting your feet down to stop and things like that. So I didn't use the front brake all that often when riding around in London, so the rear brake is really important, and I've got to say it's actually rather good. It definitely isn't a high performance braking system on the back here. It's quite mushy, it's quite soft, but I actually quite like that for a rear brake, because it's just very progressive, it's very gentle, and I find myself just, you know, constantly feathering it as I am now, just on and off, come to a stop, and it's nice and progressive. The only little bugbear I have with it is linked to the ABS. Actually, the ABS seems to come on quite suddenly and quite early. I think actually it definitely kicks in well in advance of any danger of it locking up. A little bit too intrusive potentially. So you definitely need to be a little bit gentle with that rear brake, because if you just stand on it, it will give you ABS quite early on in the picture. There's a bus, he doesn't want to use the bus lane, but no doubt when I move into the bus lane he'll want to have a bit of it. No, we're all good then. So the other thing riding a bike in the city is, you know, a nice slim profile on the machine enables you to get through the traffic, to filter a little bit, squeeze through those gaps where you can. You know, we're going to get some static traffic up here, no doubt, and thankfully, because of the way this bike is set up in its profile, it is quite easy just to roll past most things. No need to take a risk here, but yeah, it's fairly low profile in that sense, fairly easy to get yourself in and about through the traffic. Even with these bar end mirrors that add at least a centimetre on each side, they really don't cause a big problem. Of course, in a city like London, you have to pick your battles a little bit. I've grown out of that whole thing of trying to get through every single gap there is out there. It's just not worth it half the time. Here we are, riding through London's Covent Garden. We're post-lockdown, but still very, very quiet out there. Very quiet indeed. I don't know how Raw Jordanian does this every day. It drives me absolutely up the wall. I quite like these little skinny tyres on this bike as well. A lot of people ask me, you know, are you going to change the tyres, put something wider on the back? No, I don't think I will. I like skinny tyres, especially in cities like this where you can just nip about, you can flick it around quite easily. I quite like that. It suits this bike quite nicely. Again, you can really hold the bike quite nicely at low speeds. No need to put your feet down. Bit of feathering on the rear brake. Clutch super light, easy to control. Get about nice and easily. Now that bus lane I can't use. It's adding to the confusion of London's bus lane debacle. You can use them if it's a red route, but not a yellow one. The bureaucracy. Now when you're sat at traffic like this, you obviously want to make sure that you can get away quickly enough. The last thing you want to do is end up getting overtaken by a bunch of taxis and cars coming from behind you. So you've got to be quick off the line, and this bike, it's got plenty of get up and go, get you smoothly away and around all that traffic. Little warning shot there. Always works well. The other thing I really like about this bike is the way that it carries its weight profile, all quite low down. As I said, it's quite a heavy bike, around 205 kilograms, but you really don't feel it at all. It's very agile, very nimble, very easy to flick about through the traffic. And, you know, when it comes time to get your foot down, it's not a chore at all, actually. It's got quite a low seat height, around 800 and something millimeters. So if, like me, I've got a 32-inch inseam, or thereabouts, and it's not a problem at all, actually. Very easy to get my foot down on this. My girlfriend's about 5'3" and she can't get her feet down on it. She's tried it out, but as long as you're, you know, of average height, you should be all right. Also, here in London, we have some truly appalling roads on some of the back streets. Absolutely terrible quality roads. And the way I've got this suspension currently set up is not indicative of how it comes from the factory, because, as you know, I've got the YSS suspension. So this is a little on the hard side. I'm in the process of getting that dialed in, but it's still a little bit jerky. That's not right. That's not the right word for it. It's a little harsh. It's a little harsh. But actually, the factory suspension was really rather good at sucking up a lot of these lumps and bumps. But the way I've got my bike set up, it's a little bit harder on your body. I'll say that much. But that's definitely something I'm addressing slowly but surely. So my overall impression for this bike when it comes to urban city riding is very, very good. I think you couldn't really ask for an awful lot more when it comes to a machine for this type of riding. Very agile, very nimble, very easy to handle. Really, really impressive machine. And as I said, you've got to be a little bit careful when it comes to the reviews that you pick up with a lot of bikes, because, you know, the journos will take them out to some beautiful alpine pass or take them out on a track and tell you how amazing they are. But in the real world, if your real world looks anything like this, you know, this is what these bikes have to go through, and it's often not talked about a lot. So I thought it was important to make this video to let you guys know, you know, if you're going to get this bike and you're thinking about urban commuting, you know, traveling in and around cities, even if you just need to ride through a city to get to where you want to get to for a bit of a blast out in the countryside, this is absolutely a machine that can handle it with a plum. It is not going to be a problem at all. And I know a lot of my Indian friends who watch this content will be saying, there ain't no city, what are you talking about? Try running it through Mumbai. Yes, if this bike can handle that, then it can handle London very easily, and it does a sterling job. So absolutely recommended if you're looking for a bike that can be fun out and about on the twisties, but also it's not going to destroy you in the cities. Definitely a big tick in the box for the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. And that's about it. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for everybody who's been subscribing to the channel recently. We've had a record month here on the Wildlife Moto channel. I can't thank you guys enough for that. If you haven't subscribed, it would be awesome if you would. Totally oblivious, bless her. But there you go. And until the next one, ride safe.